significantly reduced. An Education Endowment Foundation study on this remarkably showed that only 11% of primary schools pupils who didn't reach that standard went on to catch up and get those 5 good GCSEs. And I personally find that stat really shocking, but also motivating for why we want to work with primary pupils, because it just gets harder and harder for them to close that gap later on if they're not reaching that standard in English and maths. And that's why fundamentally attainment and making progress matters at all stages, because we know that attainment gap only gets wider the further through school pupils go. We have the next slide, please. So why have we taken a collective approach to this? You'll hear a bit about the work that our organisations do in a minute. But there are a few reasons why working together on this issue of attainment is really important. Firstly, we can have a much larger, more influential voice, and I think that is particularly key for making the point to the public, to politicians, about the attainment gap. None of our organisations on their own could influence closing that attainment gap, but working collectively together, we can strive towards that goal, and we can have an influence to get politicians focused on the importance of closing it. Between us, we represent a much greater number of schools, pupils, different geographies. You'll hear a bit about some work in the post-16 space from Get Further too. And between us, we have a really wide range of contacts and networks that we've been able to influence more widely. And that's one of the things I really love about being part of the FAIR Education Alliance, that there's that feeling of working towards collective goals, but using our different resources, our different skills, our different contacts more widely to work towards a fairer education. And then the final thing, we've been able to share learning together about what's working, and we've been able to collectively build our evidence base about what's working to tackle the attainment gap. And that helps to build our case for support when we are trying to influence. Next slide, please. We've got for you just a brief timeline of what the Fair Education Alliance have been doing more broadly in this space since 2014. So going all the way back to 2014, there was a call for schools to be given more support to catch up disadvantaged pupils who fall behind. There's been a lot of work going on to measure the disadvantage gap and what that attainment gap is looking like. And personally, I always find those studies that the Fair Education Alliance produce, including with the Education Policy Institute, really shocking, but also just really useful evidence for reminding myself, my team, our wider stakeholders, why our work is so important and why this focus on attainment and the closing the attainment gap really, really matters. Sadly, over the last few years, those reports have shown that the progress is slowing down in closing the disadvantage gap. There was a report just pre-pandemic about it taking 500 years to close the attainment gap at the rate of change. Pandemic obviously raised even greater concerns about that disadvantage gap widening. And as a result of that, the Fair Education Alliance, together with a number of the member organisations, set up a tuition advocacy group to focus on catch-up and lost learning through the pandemic. And that eventually evolved to advocate for the national tutoring programme and play a role in how that's been implemented, with a number of members, including the three of us including a number of members becoming official providers. I'm going to let Get Further talk specifically about the post-16 space, because that's been a little bit different. And that group continues to meet on a bi-weekly basis, continuing to try and influence the success of the national tutoring programme and advocate for tutoring as an effective intervention to close the gap. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Annabelle, who I think will share a bit more about Get Further's work in this space, and particularly with the post-16 funding available.
Thanks so much, Susanna. And yes, as you said, it's slightly different for us working in the post-16 area. So my name is Annabelle. I am one of the programme managers. And at Get Further, we match students to top tutors in small groups in that post-16 space, so to help them to get their gateway qualifications when they're retaking their maths and English GCSEs. The 16 to 19 tuition fund has allowed colleges to have greater funding, but that does have a ticking time on it, so we're just trying to make the most of that whilst we can at the moment. We've worked with over 700 students this year so far, and currently have over 600 enrolled into our November programmes. Looking at that value of an additional GCSE maths grade, it's actually equal to around £14,500 across lifetime earnings, and 7,300 with that English as well. So those greatest returns are really from jumping from the old school D to a C grades, or 3 to a 4, which is the real area that we're focusing on at the moment. Due to the vulnerable nature of the students that we're working with in those further education colleges, our approach to whole child attainment really does start with our tutoring staff. We're putting lots of time and resources into their training at the moment, as their relationship with the student seems to be the thing that has the greatest impact and the greatest positive impact on their overall attainment. We complete training with them on their first session, so how they should be setting up goals, how they should be relating to those students. We have included introduction templates as well, where they can express any additional learning needs that they might want or have, including things like pronouns as well, any accessibility things that they might need. So making sure that they're really comfortable from the get-go. We run webinars supporting EAL and SEND students, and we've also started a new partnership with another charity at the moment that works with students in care, so working about how we can support those post-16 students in care to get those GCSEs to make sure they can go on to the next step in their education or career. As for the impact, we are still crunching the data from our latest programmes, but we found that actually after 24 sessions, the number of students increasing their grade from a D to a C, or 3 to a 4, was 26% higher than the national average. So really excited to see how the progress has been made in our most recent programmes. I think we're now passing on to the next one. Yes, over to Jo.
Thank you, thanks Annabelle. So I'm Jo Meredith, I'm the Director of Alternative Provision at the Tutor Trust. And as Susanna said earlier, we are part of the advocacy group too. So our mission is to transform lives through tutoring, and we provide academic support to disadvantaged young people. So our focus is primarily on pupil premium pupils who are at risk of not reaching the national standard, but also we work with young people who have been excluded from school or are at risk of exclusion, looked after children, and those in alternative provision. So we work with children and young people from year 5 through to year 11. And we've also worked with some care leavers, similar to Annabelle, looking at ensuring that they've got those vital grades in English and maths at that borderline. Since September, we've worked with over 2,000 pupils through our school partnerships. And we've matched those young people with our highly trained and skilled tutors. We offer maths and reading in primary school and English, maths and science in secondary school. Some of our groupings are 1 to 3, some of them 1 to 2, and some of them are 1 to 1. We run additional programmes to address the needs of the whole child. So in addition to tutoring, we also have a programme called the Right Angle Programme, where we offer counselling in addition to the tutoring, and we work with another Manchester charity who focus on pupil wellbeing. And we have just begun a partnership with the Prince's Trust to offer a programme of tutoring and life skills, both of which are really popular and really beneficial and impactful. Our tutors are not just tutors offering English, maths and science support, but we also encourage them to be positive role models for the children and young people that they work with. And part of the training that we do with them is to enable them to have the skills to build the confidence in the young people and the children, and also to offer the resilience, both of which have been absolutely vital over the past 18 months, whilst life has been very different for the young people that we work with. So I think we're going to go over now to our discussion. So Sue-Ann, if you want to move the slides along. Oh no, sorry, action tutoring. I missed Susanna, sorry, it's Susanna's slide.
That's all right. I want to allow,
Susanna.
not a problem. I want to allow enough time for our activity, so I'll try and whiz through this briefly. Action Tutoring was fundamentally set up because we recognise that private tutoring is a booming industry. 1 in 4 children now have a private tutor, and in London that figure rises to a fairly astonishing 42%. But private tutoring is obviously very expensive and therefore not necessarily reaching those that really need it. So we were established to try and make the benefits of tutoring more widely available. We focus relentlessly on supporting pupil premium pupils who are at risk of not achieving national standards. We work across primary year 5 and 6, and then at secondary year 7, 10 and 11. And all of our work supporting nearly over 8,000 pupils is our target for this year. All of that work is delivered through school partnerships, where we match high quality volunteer tutors with those pupils. And one of the things we really love is the diversity of our volunteer tutor pool. We have plenty of students, we have corporate volunteers, we have retired volunteers, each bringing many different skills and benefits to the pupils that they work with, in addition to the academic knowledge. What we're aiming for is that our primary pupils will reach that national standard in English and maths, so that they're significantly more likely to go on to achieve at GCSE. And then at GCSE that they can leave school with those 5 good GCSEs, including English and maths, to significantly reduce their risk of ending up not in education, employment or training. We've developed our own bespoke training and resources that the tutors use to help ensure quality. We oversee our programmes through a programme coordinator model. That's our paid staff that manage the volunteers, the pupils, and work closely with the schools. And all of that is to try and make running the programmes as easy as for schools as possible. And whilst our focus is really on that attainment angle, we know that there are so many other benefits that our programme offers, not least confidence, motivation and study skills. So that's a brief snapshot for you of what our 3 organisations do, and there are plenty of others within the network, the Fair Education Alliance network, that are also working to tackle attainment. So do find out what they're working on as well. We're going to hand over to Jo now for our discussion.
Yes, so this is where I kind of launched into earlier, but so we're back to the discussion. This is the really important bit now, because we would like to involve everybody that is in this breakout room in thinking about what attainment actually means. So we have a number of questions, and we're going to use a mural board in order for you to be able to contribute to this. We have about 7 minutes left, so it'll probably take about 5 minutes, and then there's a little opportunity for a little bit of a plenary. So the questions are: what does attainment mean to you, and what should it mean nationally? Does education in the UK focus too much on attainment at the expense of other measures? How can the work that we do ensure that the disadvantage gap doesn't grow further? And is the NTP enough? What else is needed to ensure pupils reach the levels that they should post-COVID? And are you benchmarking against the child themselves or against a national standard? So big questions that we're not going to be able to do justice to in the time that we've got, but at least it enables us to kind of understand what other people out there are thinking. So I am going to put the link to the mural into the chat, and if you will click on this link, and then you can hopefully put your own views on there, and we can all share those views. So the link is in the mural now, so if you will click on that link, then that will open up the mural board for all of us. Thank you. That's great. It's lovely to see people already very busily whizzing around the screen. So we're going to give possibly about 4 minutes in order for you to do this.
If anyone is struggling to add a post-it, if you double click on the screen, it should add a new post-it for you.
there's lots of activity going on, so it's really great to see all the contributions that people are making. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Keep going. I think we'll give everybody another kind of 30 seconds or so just to get those final comments in. Okay, thank you, everybody. I think if we can return back to the Zoom screen just to finish off. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jo. So I think just looking at those different areas, I can still see people whizzing around on there, which is fantastic. And there are definitely some questions there that are provoking more of a response than others. Poor old benchmarking at the bottom has not got much of a look in, but I imagine that is more time related than anything. So just in the past couple of minutes, I think it'd be great if I'll just read through some of the questions and sort of cover some of the key answers that are coming from them before we head back to the main room, really. So looking at what does attainment mean to you and what should it mean nationally? A lot of references to being independent and to leaving school at a good level as well. So making sure that students and children can reach their academic potential. Looking at whether education in the UK focuses too much on attainment, and this has got some more detailed responses in there as well. So a lot of concern around there being too much of a narrowment around the type of attainment that is achieved. Especially just one very passionate yes at the national level as well. Looking down at the next one, we have yes.
Sorry, just to interrupt. There's been a mistake on the timings on the breakout room, so please keep going for your 1.5 minute, but we are all going to get pulled out quickly and then put back in for 10 minutes so we can have a bit more of a rounded discussion on the topics and the comments that have come through, so don't feel too rushed. But just a note to everyone that we are going to get pulled out, but we'll be coming back into the room for another 10 minutes.
That is a relief to hear, because I was running out of breath there.
Sorry,
so I think in which case I think it would probably be a nice idea, because I can imagine that people still have a lot of things to share. If we spend the next minute or so finishing up any extra areas that you'd like to share on that mural. And then once we get pulled out and pulled back in again, we can have a more rounded discussion instead of me whizzing through and reading aloud to you. Fantastic. Once we come back in, it might be quite nice to hear from anyone who's got a particular passion about any of these questions. So once we jump back in 5 seconds, we'll go through the questions, and if you've got something you'd like to explain a little bit further that can't be explained on the mural, I'll see you shortly.
You back into breakout rooms in a couple of minutes or so. So when in a second there'll be a pop-up that comes up and you'll be able to choose which breakout room you go into, wellbeing, skills or attainment, either if you've already been in it or if you're just joining. So just 1 minute.
Great. So welcome back, everyone. Sorry about that disruption in the breakout rooms, but we have worked it out, the timings, and we're just going to be given the option to rejoin those breakout rooms to continue the discussion for a further few minutes. Then we'll come back and you'll get to choose the next breakout rooms. So what you should have now is an option appearing for a room to join if you just want to go ahead and choose on that, and we'll see you in there.
If you can't see it, if you click on breakout room.
Welcome back, those of you who have already joined, and apologies again for that disruption. Some really great comments on the mural, and really glad that we can give some more time to have a discussion around those as well. Annabelle, I can see on my screen, so hand over back to you once you're ready to kick off.
Amazing, thanks so much, Sue. And I think someone's just asked for the mural link again.
I'll do that, Annabelle.
Ah, perfect. Thank you so much. Fantastic. So instead of me sort of whizzing through it a million miles an hour, it'd be great to hear from you guys about how you feel about attainment as well. So looking at that first post-it, what does attainment mean to you and what should it mean nationally? Feel free to share in the chat box, or if you've got something that you'd like to share aloud with the group, or perhaps a question to ask aloud to the group, now's a great opportunity to hear that. So what does attainment mean to you and what should it mean nationally? Has anyone got anything they'd like to say or share?
Anyone feeling brave this morning?
Sorry, I can read a million miles an hour again if everyone likes. That's clearly what we're
There are
going
a lot
for.
of comments in there, Annabelle, about attainment being about more than just the kind of standard GCSEs. So there are a lot of comments in there about it being the whole child and us thinking kind of wider than the kind of perceptions that are out there generally, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned before, sort of the ability to being able to learn independently has been brought up as well, which I think is obviously quite challenging to measure, but a really, really good point of how we measure attainment. Fantastic. Has anyone got anything that they'd like to add on that particular point at all? So in the chat, we've got Jenny sharing as well. So again, looking at that, sort of those 5 good GCSEs, and given comparability of the grades, this means that a significant group of students will never attain. Does this mean that they don't attain later in life in different ways, in different skills and areas? The system has narrow choices in the definition of success, particularly with the threat to BTECs. That's a really interesting point, and I was able to go to the Association of Colleges conference last week, where there was a lot of chat around the new T levels and the fact they've now reduced or removed, sorry, the exit requirement for maths and English GCSEs. So there's a lot of discussion going around that at the moment, and it's a really interesting thing to do to look at in greater detail. Thank you. So looking at the next one, so does education in the UK focus too much on attainment at the expense of other measures and soft skills? Has anyone got any experience or something they'd like to add here?
I don't think it's necessarily that point of being at the expense of something else, but I think often there's a lack of understanding that you're not going to achieve those kind of academic attainment factors if you've got serious things going on with your mental health, or serious things going on in how safe you feel in your home or in your school, or those sorts of things. I think they're sort of sometimes seen as separate, all those other elements of your life, and then how you're attaining, without that kind of acknowledgement that actually that kind of Maslow's hierarchy type of thing, that if they're not safe and comfortable and fed, they're not going to necessarily have a very high chance of attainment. So I think it's realizing those links is sometimes missing.
Absolutely, thank you, Anna. Yeah, it's looking at that context, I guess, isn't it, around the whole child and taking into account those different areas. Something that's mentioned is looking at those students who are neurodivergent, for example, and there's also a lot of reference to skills that are used in the workplace as well, so used for their next step in their career or education. So certainly some work to be done there as well. Looking at the next post-it, so how can the work we do to ensure that the disadvantage gap doesn't grow any further? Is the NTP enough? I imagine we've got lots of people on the call with experience and opinions on this, so it'd be great to hear from you on that one.
One thought I've got from School Home Support is that it's about the influence in at national policy side, so that you're actually looking at ensuring that the strategies are there to tackle it, rather than it just being there is one, and that all there seems to be is the focus that it exists, rather than how it can be narrowed, and focusing on because all of those researches focus on the fact that it exists. They don't come up with anything new, they don't come up with investment, they don't come up with the change in policy or priorities or framework of measurement.
Absolutely, that was really useful, thank you, Kat. And I think that the main point that's coming across on the mural, the main thing that's repeated is the fact that the NTP is definitely not enough, and it's echoed that it's very valuable, but it's that quality, and like you say, it's the setup of how it's given to the students that is where the problem is. Has anyone else got anything else they'd like to add on the NTP at all?
It's not on the NTP, but I think we also need to bear in mind the fact that that gap has already opened up before pupils even start school. Sue, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure the Alliance is doing much on those preschool years at the moment. And I wonder if that's something to be thinking about for the future. How do we help more pupils before they even start school be at a similar level, so that gap is being narrowed before it has the chance to open up?
Yeah, definitely. I think our work mostly around that kind of age range in terms of early years, and kind of preschool is mostly focused around those family interventions and that home support. But Susanna, definitely worth having a conversation about whether we should be doing more to advocate for other kind of types of support around this, and especially in response to the government funding kind of that is meant to be going towards tackling that kind of early start, and closing that gap before they, as you say, enter the system, and the kind of damage is already done in a way. But yeah, definitely keen to hear ideas if there is a demand or a want to have that conversation about how we target that beyond looking at family support.
That's great, thanks, Suwan. And then looking at the next one, it's looking at what else is needed to ensure that pupils reach the levels that they should be post-COVID. And it's probably something that everyone is thinking about and actioning in a different way. So it'd be great to hear any thoughts on this as well.
Grace, you put a really interesting point in the chat in terms of like the NTP being valuable, but more is needed. Any kind of bright ideas about specifically what that might be for you?
I think for us, so for instance, Trust, so we work with from primarily disadvantaged backgrounds, and from kind of secondary level onwards. I think what we're really keen to see is alongside sort of, the tutoring focus on tutoring more on that kind of personal development and well-being angle, so kind of supporting young people with those broader opportunities and skills that they might have missed out on developing over the last 18 months, kind of the personal skills and those things that kind of later down the line might focus in terms of kind of skills for employment. But just kind of those broader experiences that have been missed out on, and a bit of funding to support schools to commit some kind of time and delivery to those as well.
Thanks, Grace. And Joe, might be worth kind of sharing in terms of your work about how you're pairing attainment with other holistic support.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. It's great because that's the approach that we're taking at the moment with some of our most disadvantaged young people, that we feel that we need to not just address the academic gaps that have developed, but also the gaps around the personal development and well-being. And what we found quite often is that we need to address that personal development and well-being gap before we can address the academic gap. And that's different for different young people. And it's also interesting to note on the mural there was quite a lot of comment around, you know, the kind of addressing the mental health issues and situations that young people have at the moment. And so there is a lot more to do other than just the academic support. And obviously funding is a massive thing that is resonating with everybody. And that's what we're here to advocate for that additional funding.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Joe. I think we're on the final 30 seconds now and people are jumping off. But just so that's quite a nice link to, I believe, the tuition advocacy group, which takes place is every other Wednesday, Suwan, online. And that sort of looks at, well, you're probably a better place to describe it more than me. Yes. So please do go for it.
Yeah, so there's a link in the chat. So the tuition advocacy group meets every other Wednesday. The agenda is very much co-created by the members. So whether that is something to be discussed on policy, on advocacy, whether that is reactive or proactive. So please do drop Lauren an email on the address in the chat if you would like to join, and also reach out to Susanna, to Sarah, to Nick, and kind of the Tutor Trust team as well, who are very active.
Gathering